This podcast is sponsored by Terraform Development proudly supports the Hopi tribe and nonprofit Hopi entities to provide essential technical support in engineering, architectural, and project management services. Eddie Kalniptua can relate to the hard work on the Hopi reservation, including the cornfield duties and traditional ceremonies that he was raised on. He values this tradition, so Terraform Development was formed to meet these needs on the Hopi reservation. Contact Terraform Development at TERRA4ORM.com and follow them on Instagram at Terraform Development.
Also sponsored by...
Hi, I'm Kiona, Hopi Relief volunteer and board member. Hopi Relief is a grassroots, Hopi-led nonprofit organization founded to provide relief services, food boxes, and essential supplies to Hopi tribal members throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Our focus is to uplift the Hopi community by empowering our people to create homegrown solutions to challenges we face. We are supported by the generosity of like-minded individuals and organizations who simply want to help. You can get involved by following us on social media, sharing our story, or donating on our website, www.hopirelief.org. We are at Hopi Relief on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
You are now listening to the Carl and J-Man Save the World podcast. I'm your host, the 5-star, 5-diamond chef, and the godfather of Hopi podcasting, J-Man. And with me is the guy that swindled his soul into buying him a battle axe at the local flea market, Carl.
The godfather. I'm the godfather of this podcast here. I'm like the Don. I'm the Don.
Yeah, I think that if we presented our that type of question to the audience, I think a lot of people would agree that I'm the godfather.
People will say, who? J-Man? Who?
They're like, yeah, Carl's the court jester.
The court jester.
Carl and J-Man Save the World podcast.
Carl's like, he's the ringleader there. So
Carl's the ringleader of the Tukas. That's what he's the ringleader of. And so there were some interesting things that transpired over the last week or so, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because we had this, there was this huge event called Arizona Gives Day. Arizona Gives Day. A lot of the nonprofit organizations out here on Hopi were promoting, for solicitations, and these nonprofits definitely do provide wonderful services for our people out here on the Hopi tribe. And Carl and J-Man got in the philanthropic mood, and so we were able to give to some of those nonprofit organizations during Arizona Gives Day. So we definitely wanted to let people out there know that Carl and J-Man care. So, we got the Carl and J-Man Cares project out there going. And then also, too, we did an interview for a very popular radio station called KTNN.
Yeah, we did. I mean, it was really fun when we talked to several of the guys from KTNN. And it's for their podcast, Native Connections, and it's also for their commercial broadcasting site on KTNN. So if you're a big fan of KTNN, go listen to us on there. We'll give you directions.
We'll give you directions, and that actually drops because today, technically, it's Wednesday, the 14th.
Oh, yeah.
So that drops tomorrow.
Yeah.
It'll be out tomorrow. They told us 2 p.m. Standard time. But if you're on the KTNN, I guess, time zone, and that's 3 o'clock your time.
So look out on Facebook after this podcast has aired, and we'll give you directions on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And then we're also still selling shirts. We have a few of them left. So if you're thinking about getting some shirts, go check those out. You can buy those at bigcartel.com, or I'm sorry, at carlandjman.com/bigcartel.com. It's been a while since we plugged those, and so you already forgot what the web address to that is. But today we've got kind of a unique topic, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so today we're going to be kind of talking about Western medicine versus traditional medicine in a way.
Sort of like which one's the better, Tylenol or Advil?
Which one's the better, Tylenol or Mamapi? And so, I guess that, this is kind of, I guess it's a topic that's talked about on the grander scale, on the scale of the larger conversation context of Indian country. But really, I think that when you talk about it out here on Hopi, that, you know, this idea of medicine, I guess, is kind of an interesting thing, because we do have, you know, traditional healers, I guess you could call them. You know, in our language, we call them tuhikas. But, you know, the topic and the subject of tuhikas is kind of something that is, I guess people out here would call an uti type of conversation, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's like, you know, tuhika is, you know, just a word for healer on the Hopi reservation. And I don't know why Hopis are afraid of tuhikas. You know, I don't know why, because tuhika means to heal people, to make sure that they're well. And for some reason, Hopis just don't like to mention tuhika in a way. I think it's because they believe that it's a witch doctor or something that they're going to get cursed by somebody. And I don't believe in anything like that. I don't believe in that tuhikas are supposed to hurt anybody.
Carl believes in things like pseudoscience, the sciences. And so, you know, you are right, though, that topic is kind of something that people don't like to talk about, and simply because and I guess there's a differentiating thing to discuss in terms of how Hopis view their traditional healers versus how other tribes view their traditional healers, because then I know that on the larger scale of Indian country that they do try to promote things like traditional healers.
Yeah.
And I think it's because that those traditional healers, that they, I guess it's kind of more of a prescription type of practice, to where they're promoting things like the local botany that's around the reservation, things like herbs, things like different types of practices that they that were once used a long time ago in the Hisat time, to be able to, I guess, provide a more healthier way for people to take care of themselves.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you know, traditional healing goes back many centuries before anything like Western medicine has to offer. And it's just because people in that sense wanted to, I guess, like heal people or make sure that the wellness of the tribe is in good order. So pretty much that's how tuhikas are meant to be used as.
And I think that there's different train of thoughts in regards to things like traditional healers or tuhikas, because I was raised in a home to where my father had this belief that if you took care of yourself, if you exercised, if you did things like ate the right foods, that if you kept yourself strong, that there was never any reason to go to a tuhika.
Oh, yeah.
Because your body would always be healthy.
Yeah.
And then my mother, because her grandfather was a tuhika, I think that she kind of leaned a little bit more towards going to those types of practices, or having at least going to go see them so that you can make sure that you're well. And so I really was raised in a home that had two different school trains of thought in terms of how they went about it. But, you know, it really does make sense to me that, you know, the way that my father kind of instilled that belief in us that, you know, if you really did take care of yourself on the physical side, then there was really no need for you to go seek those types of services.
Oh, yeah, that is true. I mean, like, you know, tuhikas in a way were used because somebody was looking at you angrily and you wanted to find out why this person was doing something to you. Or you wanted to have, like, maybe there's something wrong with your insides that you don't know what's going on. And, you know, there's a sort of like a difference between bone doctors and traditional healers.
And I think too, also, like, there's some contexts too that we didn't really discuss in regards to tuhikas, because you mentioned a little bit as to why people out here don't really like to talk about him. And it is something that I don't talk about either with folks that I'm not comfortable with. And so, like, if you and I were to have a private conversation, and we've had these conversations before, then, you know, I would share more about my opinions and share kind of more about, you know, what my beliefs are. But really, it's because that, you know, there's a sacredness in terms of how we perceive them, which is another reason why we don't talk about them. And it's it's the same concept, I guess, really about how we talk about our ceremony and certain things about our ceremonies that we don't include when we have these conversations on the podcast. And I think that that's probably how other people's perspectives are as well. And I think that, a difference is that with Tuhikas, it's because we have this belief that it almost overlaps with this concept of, like, if you're a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like with Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
And that, that there's this whole other universe and that there's this whole other type of, I guess, in a way, magic that happens. But it's kind of a difficult thing to talk about, to where you actually discuss it in a way where there's validity behind it, at least in the way how we think of what validity is. Because then, now we live in this day and age to where if you can't see it, then I'm not going to believe it. But Hopi's, the concept of Hopi, especially how we perceive our ceremony, how we perceive our world, that there's a lot of concepts of things that we don't see, but yet we still believe that they exist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just the same way as, like, we don't see Santa Claus, but yet we still believe in Santa Claus. And Hopis love Santa Claus for some reason.
My favorite one is I think it was like a Santa Claus movie where the father was telling his son that I just can't believe something if I haven't seen it in my life. So the son responds to him and he says, well, have you ever seen $1 million before? And the father was like, no. But $1 million exists, right? And he's like, yeah. And so, sometimes it really does take us to go back to the youth minds to really think of these things. But that really is kind of the context, and I guess in terms of our traditional healers.
Yeah.
And but I guess kind of sharing some experiences from your childhood or even your adulthoods. What are some concepts of traditional medicine that you've that you've seen being administered or taken that you're willing to share?
I mean, like, we've all been to Tuhikas as children, one or another. And it's because maybe your mom has thought that, there's something wrong with you. And sometimes your mom doesn't want to pay a hefty bill at the local IHS, and then just taking to traditional medicine.
No one pays a hefty bill at IHS. That's why we go to IHS, Carl.
They don't charge you like they charge me?
No.
So I must be the only one getting charged then.
I don't think you got charged.
But anyway, the concept of that.
I know who you work for, Carl. I know you didn't get charged.
But the whole concept of it is that, we wanted to keep that tradition strong of, like, Tuhikas in a way. That there's something that maybe Western medicine does not offer or does not see, like there, that movie, what was it with Tim Allen? Remember the Jungle to Jungle?
I've heard of the movie.
Yeah, Jungle to Jungle, where Tim Allen goes and says that he's like to this shaman, the shaman, the medicine man, the witch doctor, and he talks about, like, he's going to go on this great journey, and it's something that he knows that what Tim Allen's going to do at the end. And Tim Allen's like, oh, you know what? I'm just, I don't believe in this hocus pocus kind of deal like that. And sure enough, I guess that's that same concept of, like, believing in something that maybe Western medicine cannot figure out. And so that's the reason why most Hopis opt to go into going into, like, to
the IHS.
Yeah, to IHS, or maybe even to, like, the Tuhika in a way. So.
Mm-hmm. And, it is, when I think about, like, I guess my experiences when I think about being young, that, some of those medicines that we used to take from our own culture was, a lot of it came from the juniper tree.
Oh, yeah.
And so you think about, in Hopi, what is the word for juniper in Hopi?
Wamapi.
I think that's specifically for the branches.
But that's just Wamaptsuki.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. But they would take, like, the branches from the trees, and then you boil them, and then you would drink whatever concoction comes from the boiled water, or you would smoke. You would burn the the leaves of the tree, and then those would be used too. Or you would also usage of the root. From the tree was also used too. And so those are some things that I remember. And it kind of makes me laugh because I didn't know this until I got very much older. But when you hear about Hopis or even Navajos, I think is one of their practices too. When you hear about them talking about burning cedar, you're not burning cedar, you're burning juniper. Because I learned that there are actually no cedar trees that exist in our forests out here in Arizona. And so, that's kind of this big misconception that, the trees out here on the reservation are juniper trees.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that too.
I found that out when they did that extreme home makeover for Lori Paez parents.
Yeah.
Because they're out in Tuba, and the guy, he's a master carpenter, and so he was the one that told the family, that hey, there's no cedar trees here in Arizona, and so what you guys burn is actually juniper.
So a white guy told us that we're wrong?
Took a bahana to tell us that we were wrong about, our labels for our own medicines, so...
That Pepto-Bismol that you drink all the time? That's not Pepto-Bismol.
That doesn't really
cure anything.
What you think is being cured.
But anyway, the whole idea between Western medicine and traditional medicine is always in that kind of constant battle that the latter always kind of wins pretty much.
Yeah, that is true. And, I think that you see that happening with a lot of our beliefs of the past.
Yeah.
Is that we're leaning more towards the Western society, that we're leaning more towards mainstream society, because then, as a parent, when sometimes your kids are having ailments, that is your quick reaction to take them to the hospital instead of to a dihikya or to a traditional healer.
Yeah.
And I think that, because we focus so heavy on the sciences now, especially in education, that, it's starting to, become a part of our own personal belief systems, that we believe in these concepts of science. But, for me, and I think probably it's true for you as well, is that you've had so many lessons in terms of Hopi and our perspectives and ideologies and our own traditional concepts of botany, our own traditional concepts of zoology, that sometimes you do see places where this Hopi belief system, especially when it comes to things like our actual physical environment, when it comes to plants, when it comes to animals, when it comes to the land itself, that our belief system about what that is within our own world is further advanced than the white man's science.
Oh, yeah.
But yet, we tend to lean heavily on the white man's science for some reason.
Exactly. And those are actually good points to that. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break here.
Strong Ones. Every Strong One's design has a story and a unique meaning. They create designs to celebrate traditions of running and uplift Native cultures across the globe. They also partner with local artists on special projects in hopes to expose talent and creativity of Hopi people. Strong Ones are often referred to as Hohongvit in the Hopi language. They can be found at hohongvit.com. That's HOHONGVIT.com. And we're back. And also, we forgot to mention at the beginning of the episode that we have a special guest today.
Yeah, we do.
We have a special guest today, and I'm really excited for bringing her on. She's actually somebody that was born and raised out here on the Hopi Reservation and decided to become a physician.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd like to bring onto the podcast Dr. Pearlyn Tomosie.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I told you that's a morning show.
For those of you that might not understand the Hopi language, Pearlyn's Hopi name is doesn't know how to make biki, so that's what that tapik.
She knows how to make biki.
No, but Dr. Tomosie is my clan sister, and so that we kind of talked about that dynamic a lot, about how we tease each other, but teasing aside, I'm very happy that she agreed to be on here and very proud of the journey that she made. So Pearlyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I just want to say anything that J-Man says today is a complete lie about me, unless it's good stuff.
I agree too. So,
Pearlyn, if you can, I guess, kind of just introduce yourself to the listeners, and I guess kind of just share a little bit about your experiences growing up here on the reservation, and kind of, I guess, give us a little bit of insight as to why you chose this career to go into medicine.
Sure. Well, of course, to start off, Nukukos Manayan Hopi Matiwa, Pakiwangwa, and also, my name's Pearlyn Tomosie. I am Water Clan from the village of Istomovi out in First Mesa. Again, thank you for having me join you guys today. And as J-Man had mentioned, I'm currently a family physician. I was born and raised in good old Palaka, well, born in Kings Canyon, but raised in Palaka. And I grew up in a single-parent home. But before, in my younger years, my maternal grandfather and grandmother were in the home with myself and my mother, who was currently working at the time. And so they played a huge part in helping to, raise me from when I was just a baby to about, 3-4 years old. But as young as I was, I remember a lot of being with them, day in and day out. And unfortunately, when I was younger, my grandmother was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal breast cancer.
Wow.
And so a lot of my last, months and days with her were spent with the field health nurses making home visits to our home, because, it got to the point where she was bedridden and, on oxygen and, just kind of all those end of life care things going on in our home. And so from that young age, I was exposed to kind of this whole, Western medicine part of things. And, at that young age, I didn't understand a lot of what was going on. But, looking back at it, it just always intrigued me, why, different medications she was having to take, the whole oxygen, all of that. It just always intrigued me, why are you doing this to, my sister, why does she need this, why does she need that? And just from that, and then, after her passing, my grandfather still stayed with us, but, at that time he was he was a type 2 diabetic, very poorly controlled. So, it was just the norm for me to have, open our refrigerator and there was, his insulin bottles there. And so it just always, I was always exposed to in from that perspective of things. And just, once, I got old enough to have to go to, my well child checks and my sports physicals, all of that, it still just always stuck with me, that it, for some reason, it just sparked something in my brain that, I sparking my interest. And so I also grew up in a home where, we go to Hikis, when things were bothering us or when we felt we needed it, and was more raised in kind of the traditional aspect that way. And I guess that kind of helped me to see both sides of things. And so I came up with this, idea, or that sparked this idea in my head, what better person or way could I help bridge, this gap between the whole Western medicine and those of us that kind of grew up and believe more in the traditional way of things than to, pursue a career myself in medicine to kind of help, bridge that gap. Because like I said, I feel like now in this day and age, I think people are starting to embrace each side of things more and more. But, back then, it was kind of a separation, like, you either do one or the other. But that was kind of, why I chose to come into medicine. And so like I said, I was born and raised out there, attended Palaka Day School when it was still Palaka Day School. And that will probably give away my age. But, and then I went on to school at Hopi Junior Senior High School, where I graduated, and then attended college for a year at ASU, and then moved to NAU. And then actually took a little break from school, I'd say about 3 years. And then, it was always in my head, though, that, I want to become a doctor. And so finally I made that decision. I think it's time that I move forward with the medical school process. And so I applied, and there's this program that I think J-Man is familiar with called InMed, and short for Indians into Medicine. And there's several, I'm not quite sure which medical schools have that program now, but the one that was kind of big in it when I was applying was the University of North Dakota.
Awesome.
And so I had applied to their process and, by luck of the draw, I guess, got a interview. And then not too long after my interview, was notified that I was selected to become part of their next incoming medical school class. And so there I went, packing up my things, this little old Hopi res girl that had never been any further really out of the state of Arizona
Wow.
to move to North Dakota to pursue my goals and my dreams.
So Pearlyn, quick question.
Uh-huh.
So when you were at Hopi Junior Senior High School, was it called Hopi Junior Senior High School back then, or was it like Keams Canyon High School back in the
I'm not
40s
that
or
old.
50s?
BIA. It was a BIA high school.
And I guess we had a conversation before we started recording, because then we did talk about because I guess in the field of medicine, especially in this field of Western medicine, and he did mention it, that I did once upon a time work for a program called Indians into Medicine at the University of Arizona, that a lot of our people out here do have ambitions, especially our young people, of going into the healthcare fields. And so we talked about really that the only knowledge that a lot of us have about the healthcare fields really comes from like Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs or what was Carl mentioned a few other shows, Doogie Howser. And so I guess if you can give us a quick, idea of what that medical school process is like, because then, I think that, and Carl and I have talked about this a lot, the fact that a lot of us that grow up on the reservation, in terms of opportunities on the Western side, that we really are disenfranchised. And so when you think about working in the health professions, you only think of, I can either become a doctor or I can become a nurse, maybe a pharmacist or a dentist, but yet there's this array of different types of professions, all these in-betweens that we have absolutely no idea about. So if you can kind of share a little bit about what that medical school process is like.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree, there are so many different, healthcare careers out there these days. But I just, speaking specifically to medical school, it basically requires, I think a lot of people who, or, just in my experience, speaking with my medical school classmates, a lot of people who become doctors definitely know they want to become a doctor from, a very young age. And so I think just going into it with that mind frame, it kind of shapes, you have to obviously definitely major in undergraduate and in specific majors, because, there's different requirements, classes that you have to take that are required to get into medical school. So once you finish that, then the whole process, there's one big test you have to take called the MCAT, which is the admission, test for medical school. And it's a big determining factor in whether you get permission to enter or not. And so that happens usually around your junior, senior year of undergrad. When I applied to medical school through the InMed program to the University of North Dakota, their application process was separate than the whole, what we call the AMCAS process, which is the process that all other medical schools that don't have a Indians into Medicine program go through. And so I had actually, being the notorious procrastinator I am, I actually missed that deadline. And so it just so happened that the Indians into Medicine deadline was still open for North Dakota. And so I did that application. Once I get over that application process, then you find out, whether you've been invited for a interview. And that's basically where there's one day set aside where they pull in all the applicants. It's much, it almost feels like, I've never been in court, but I imagine this is what it feels like when you're on the, the stand, but you're basically on one end of the table and you have, all these other doctors that are associated with the medical school, the dean of the medical school, several professors who are just kind of, interviewing you. And of course they say, be yourself, be comfortable. But it's kind of hard to be yourself and be comfortable when you're basically, having all these questions shot at you. And
I was going to say, I'm sorry. I was going to say, well, Carl and I had been to court, so we could tell you exactly what that feeling is like. No, I'm just kidding.
So
I believe you have, but I don't believe Carl has.
Yeah, I have never been.
Carl's the ultimate soul's boy. I don't think anybody out there would believe Carl's been.
So is like you became a family doctor, right? You're a physician. Is there like a different type of medical doctor versus just family doctor or family practice?
So it's basically there's different specialties, I guess I should say. Medical school is just all doctors have to go to medical school, whether they're surgeons, plastic surgeons, neurologists. All doctors go to medical school. Once you finish the 4 years of medical school, I should say the first 2 years for most medical schools are basically classroom. It's laying the framework of learning how the body works, and then once you kind of get a good idea of that, then you kind of go into, all the disease process and learning these different illnesses and treatments and how to diagnose, all of that stuff. Then the last 2 years of medical school, for me at least, were applying that. They set up rotations for you to rotate through the different specialties, like you mentioned, surgery, neurology, OBGYN, family medicine, psychiatry, all of that you rotate through. And I think that's not only to apply what you've learned in the real world, but to also kind of help you determine, what type of doctor you want to be.
So,
and then,
was that your first choice, the family doctor? Was that or family physician? Was that your first choice?
It actually wasn't. I really wanted to become an OBGYN. That was what I really had thought I wanted to do. And I think that's probably because I just had awesome preceptors when I did my OBGYN rotation. But the thing that, I think family medicine was definitely a close second, but I think what turned the tables for me was when the OBGYNs, go in. I really like delivering babies, but once you deliver the baby, your job is kind of done. And then the other, whether it be a pediatrician or a family physician, kind of steps in and then takes over the care, of the new baby. And then once the mom follows up, usually it's either with the OBGYN or her family physician. And so I wanted to follow the baby. I wanted to watch that. I mean, because how neat would it be to deliver a baby and then watch that baby grow up, into adulthood and still be able to take care of them. And so that was the turning point for me, was that, I want to become a family physician so that I could. And a family physician is exactly what it's meant to say, that you take care of the family, from infants all the way to, geriatrics.
We should ask Solo that question about what does it feel like to deliver a baby and then watch that baby grow up and still take care of that baby into adulthood. So we'll have to get Solo Onse on the pod to ask that.
Solo thinks I'm cool, so you know what, you can.
I think that there's so much to talk about, especially in the field of medicine, in the field of health, because there was a comment that I did want to make, especially in regards to medical school. Because I think that a lot of the underrepresented people that work within medical schools or students that are trying to get into medical schools, that there's this huge argument that medical schools, especially the admissions process, really were built to serve a particular population. Because then, I think one thing that you mentioned, that you didn't mention, Pearlyn, in terms of applying for medical school, that it does cost. Because then if you get interviews at medical schools in different parts of the country, that it involves traveling and then, having to buy things like suits and, the proper attire when you're doing the interviews for the medical school. And so, I think that there could probably be a huge conversation around that, a huge conversation around something that, your favorite academic podcasts like to reference as institutionalized racism. But one of the things that I definitely wanted to talk about, though, today was, I guess, our contemporary state of our Native people. And that, unfortunately, that if you're somebody that's familiar with this, that Native people have high rates of almost everything that you could have high rates of in regards to bad health, high rates of diabetes, high rates of high cholesterol, high rates of things like heart disease, alcoholism, and etc. And so, out to Carl and Pearlyn, why do you think that the reason why a lot of us are unhealthy these days?
Well, for me, I think that everybody likes pickles out here for some reason. Pickles and hot Cheetos in that same combination.
It's together, yeah.
And then even before pre-COVID, during our tikivas, during our dances, you'd have the Piccadilly sellers.
The snow cones are
sellers.
The snow cone sellers. And I think it's because of Western influences that are so so strong in our culture. You know, we have during Tikives, you'll have on the outskirts, you'll have like people selling burritos and burgers and hot dogs and stuff like that, and or snow cones, and those are the types of things that are not traditional or associated with like the traditional ceremonies that we have. And when you think about ceremonies, you're thinking about something simple. Like, you know, nukwivi and bikami and biki, you know, those are the things that are simple enough for you to eat. But yet we consume a lot of the Western society stuff. And that's what contributes a lot to our understanding that tikives are meant for like food, that it's in the grand part of everything. So I think I think even going back further than that, you know, growing up when, you know, like I said, you know, I grew up a lot with my grandparents. I always remember, you know, getting commodity food boxes. Yeah.
And it was always things, you know, that weren't the healthiest, you know, the big old block of cheese and the huge can of peanut butter, you know, all of that stuff. And I think, you know, we definitely do have a lot of, you know, Western influence. And then also, you know, I honestly don't say a lot of us can truly say we are, you know, traditional anymore. And I mean that in that, you know, back then when, you know, the men were going to their fields to plant, you know, they had to walk there, they had to run there. Whereas in these days, you know, I know J-Man just jumps in his car and heads down to his field and doesn't, or if he even has a field.
I fly to my field. That's how I get there.
He virtual plants now, so
yeah. I believe that. And so I think we just don't have that. We have a lot of, you know, the Western influence as far as what we're consuming, and then, you know, we're just not as active, and because we're spoiled. You know, we've kind of come into this day and age where we're not required to move and, you know, lift things and all of that as back then when they you know, they had no choice. That was just how they lived.
Mm-hmm. So if a doctor says, you know, don't lift heavy objects, do you listen to the doctor or you listen to the Hopi side?
I think you listen to your body. That's what I always tell my patients.
I think the other thing too, you know, is that, you know, the fact that we are living unhealthy now, and the fact that, you know, a lot of us that we're not really doing anything about it because, you know, Carl and I, we've had these conversations often that we know that we eat unhealthy. We know that we need to exercise more, but it's something that we don't do. And I think that this is probably something that's very true with men, is that, you know, we have no concept of the what do they call it? I guess taking care of yourself before there's actually a problem. And so, you know, most of us, you know, like if there's something wrong with us, we're not going to go to the hospital until, you know, absolutely can't walk anymore.
Yeah, like we're dying and stuff like that. And it's like, I'll maybe go to the hospital.
You're like, oh, what's this weird lump on my neck? Well, I'll take care of it when it starts hurting.
In about 30 years or so.
Yeah.
And so I guess, Pearlyn, you know, from your experiences working in the hospital, being a family physician, is that something that you see often, especially with Native folks?
Oh, for sure. And like you said, the males are definitely, you know, more notorious at that than the females. But again, I think, you know, it kind of goes back to, you know, males are, you know, have this, you know, sense of pride in them. This masculinity and to have to admit that, you know, they're hurting or something's wrong or they don't feel right, you know, goes against that. And so I think that's where a lot of, you know, I can tell you countless stories of, I mean, one time I was working in the ER and this old Tasova man came in and his basically half of his foot was gangrenous. It was black, you know, but he said, you know, well, I have sheep to herd and I have water to haul and, you know, I can't, you know, I had no time basically to pay attention to my foot that's basically dying. And, you know, unfortunately had to end up having, I want to say probably a below the knee amputation. But,
oh, wow.
I mean, you know, we see that all the time. And so that's definitely a struggle that I think a lot of us physicians, especially when it comes to Native Americans, definitely deal with, you know, on a daily basis.
And then the other conversation too that I wanted to have was because we talked about it at the beginning when we set up this episode that as kids that, the place that we went to, if we weren't going to Tehike to get our treatment was to this place that, the notorious Indian Health Services, IHS. And, I think that, the whole concept of IHS is very interesting for those that aren't familiar that, that the federal government does have a legal obligation to take care of tribes because of the land that was given to the federal government by tribes. And so, that kind of created this concept of the IHS system. And so, the IHS system is kind of something that's always been almost in a way a bullseye, I guess, from our native people because of, how we think that, the IHS is ill-equipped to take care of the services that are needed by our communities. And but then, growing up on the reservation, that when you've only gone to an IHS facility, that you develop this idea that that's how hospitals are. That it's not until you see other type of health facilities off the reservation, because I remember that my father had some treatment that needed to be done at a hospital in, I think it was like Surprise, Arizona or something like that.
Yeah.
And he went there and he had to stay overnight. And man, I was so impressed by their hospital.
Really?
Because then, the room that he had to stay in, it was almost like a hotel room. And the thing that I really remember was that when it came time to meal time, that they actually had a menu.
Really?
And that you got to choose, what it is that you wanted for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then they would bring it. And I was just like all awestruck, like, wow, this must be like a real fancy hospital, but not realizing that, that there are a lot of other health facilities that are like that. And so when you think about your local reservation IHS, like for me, it'd be Tuba Hospital up there in Tuba, that, you think about those rooms that you have to stay in if you have to stay in overnight, that you have a roommate, and it's a building, a structure that was probably built in the 60s, 70s. And, back in my day, I actually used to work there in the hospital, and I used to work in the kitchen. And I can attest that the kitchen food is actually pretty good. It's pretty decent. But the fact that they come on these trays that look like that they were purchased in the 70s and the 80s, that make it really look, not really very good.
Hospital-like,
and so, I think that because for Native folks that's like what we're accustomed to, and that a lot of times that, for anybody that has had family members that suffer from a particular type of ailment, that sometimes your local IHS isn't equipped to take care of those types of things. And so you have to travel miles to Flagstaff, Winslow, or even Phoenix to receive those types of services. And so, a lot of people, like I said, there's this bullseye on the IHS that the IHS doesn't take care of our people. But I heard a really good quote from a native physician. His name's Dr. Donald Warren, in explaining the whole IHS system. And he basically described it as, if you think of IHS as a vehicle, and that vehicle, in order for it to get from point A to point B, it needs X amount of gas in order to drive from point A to point B. But saying that the person that's responsible for filling the tank up with gas is Congress, because Congress essentially is the one that designates and creates these budgets. And so really it's Congress that cuts that fuel card in half, and so it only allows IHS to get halfway from point A to point B, which is a real huge issue. And so, Pearlyn, I'm sure you have a lot of experiences working with IHS facilities, and so if you can speak a little bit about that dynamic, and especially from somebody that's actually worked within it.
Yeah, for sure. And like we had mentioned, I grew up in that that IHS system, and back then it's when the Kings Canyon IHS was still there and standing. And so, as a kid, I remember, going in and waiting for hours and hours, and to have, a 1 minute visit with a doctor who barely looked at you. And, like I said, a lot of the time back then it was, my grandparents taking me in. And, a lot of our grandparents, speak mainly Hopi. And so to have a doctor, kind of roll their eyes at you because, your grandparents are speaking a language they don't understand and not fully understanding what's going on with you. So, of course you get, suboptimal care. And so, like I said, I think that's a lot of the framework as to why I decided to become a doctor, and probably a lot of the new, younger, up and coming physicians. That's probably a lot of the drive behind why they also want to become physicians is to kind of, I think if we, the more of us that know that system and have experienced it can, step in and help to, change people's way of thinking and the way of practicing. I think that definitely we can move forward. And like you said, that's a perfect example of what the IHS system is, it's definitely in Congress's hands. And so now speaking to, the Native Americans that are making their way up there to Washington, D.C., that's awesome that, a lot of us are going to benefit from that, not only in the IHS system, but other, avenues as well. But I think in this day and age, that's why I really try to, any young mind I can try to help mold to pursue their dream of going into healthcare, whether it be, like you said, a physician, dentist, X-ray technician, pharmacist, anything. I think the more of us that kind of infiltrate those IHS systems, we can kind of help to change that for the better. And then, we come in with a different mind frame, we knowing both sides of the traditional part of it and the Western part of it. I think a lot of us younger providers definitely practice in a different way than, I guess your old.
Western,
I guess when
Western,
you think of a doctor, you think of a doctor. I, in my mind, think of, this old, 60, 70-year-old Sahana man, coming in. But, these days, you definitely, and I hear it all the time, I'll walk into a visit and, people's eyes basically pop out of their head, you're the doctor. And so I think it's definitely awesome that we have a lot more Native Americans who are becoming interested in the healthcare, because we definitely, need it to help bridge that gap. And I think once we get to that point, we will see a lot more of people utilizing IHS and, not one. Because if you think about it, I know when I was smaller, I was scared to go to IHS, there was almost that fear there of what are they going to do to me. But hopefully, like I said, we can kind of help turn that around and not make it such a scary or bad experience anymore.
Thought like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, when I think of physicians, I think of somebody attractive like a Christina Yang or April Kepner, and I've already expressed these opinions to the Res Famous wife, so I'm not afraid of
Demi
sleeping
Moore
on the couch.
So before we go, is there anything that you would like to say for like inspiring people, youngsters that want to pursue a career in a medical field? Is there anything that you want to say to them?
Just, I've always said this. I think I grew up, like I said, super poor, single parent home. Once my grandparents were gone, I didn't have the best upbringing, was exposed at a young age to things that kids probably shouldn't be exposed to, alcoholism, domestic violence, all of that stuff. And so I'm probably the prime example of when they say, born to fail, but, we're built to succeed because we come from strong roots being Native Americans. Everything that has been put in front of us have always, has basically been to destroy us. But, we're still here. We're still thriving. We're still growing. And so I think Native American kids and young adults are definitely, we have it in us to stick it out. Medical school and residency can definitely be a scary, intimidating thought to think of. But I've always said that, if I can do it, anybody can. I didn't have a doctor in my family to look up to, or really anybody in the health field, that could kind of give me advice. But I think if you're driven and you want to become better and bring this back to my home, or, to Native American lands, what I learned to help us forward and become stronger in this. You know, I think definitely anybody that has a small little spark in them, run with it, and they can do it. If I can do it, anybody can.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, because, you know, without your knowledge in the medical field, I mean, we're just basically learning from Doogie Howser and House, pretty much.
Christina Yang.
Christina Yang. All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Pearlyn.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Pearlyn. Definitely, you know, give a big shout out to you for, you know, accomplishing something that I know is very difficult to do. And so, you know, big shout out to you. Big shout out to your husband, to Satani Stu, man with the iron stomach, to be able to, for his bono to consume all of that burnt food. So, you know, big shouts out to him. And then also, too, I'd like to give a special shout out to one of our young fans who's having a birthday coming up soon. So a big happy birthday to Bahomia Holmes out there. One of our little listeners out there. And so his request was for Carl and J-Man to be at his birthday party. So we'll see what happens.
Carl and J-Man at a birthday party. We're like the Ghostbusters, remember? Where we saved the world and they were like destined to just be doing birthday parties.
When we hit hard times, that's what we can do, birthday parties.
Like $10 and we get $5 each. But happy birthday to you guys, or happy birthday to you especially. So, and if you do have birthday parties and you want to have a special request, you know, give us a shout out. I mean, we're
slide into our DMs.
Slide into our DMs, and we won't turn you down.
And so, you know, thank you all for out there again for listening to us. This is episode 9 of season 4. So next week's episode, season 10, will be our season finale.
Oh, yeah.
We take our little break, our little hiatus, but definitely we'll be pushing out more content through our YouTube channel. We're going to continue with the Cooking with J-Man episodes and a couple of other special episodes that we hope you all enjoy.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And if you want to become a donor, please go to anchor.fm/CJ podcast to make a donation and to listen to our past episodes. Or if you want to donate $1, just go to buymeacoffee.com/CJ podcast and donate $1 or give us whatever you want.
And then you can follow us on our social medias at Carl and J-Man on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100,000 subscribers. That way we can get the special YouTube plaque that they sent to you. In last episode, I think I mentioned, you know, we're getting a little bit closer, but we're only about 999,800 subscribers away.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Carl and J-Man Save the World podcast. My name is Carl, and this is my best friend J-Man.
So long. Quack, quack.